I'm Umut. I work at Sauce Labs for the last 4 years. I mainly worked at the real device cloud, and for the last 6 months I've been working in the Appium team full-time. So the reason of this talk is basically when I started full-time in the Appium project, we had these a lot of issues that people had hard time with the launch performance of Appium, and it was a bit like not clear enough what was going on, why it was slow in certain cases. And Jonathan Lips did this really nice blog about how to speed up, and like a nice pie chart about what is taking most of the time and etc. So I just wanted to kind of like verbalize it and visualize it in a talk. Who, by the way, knows the Appium Pro website from Jonathan? Just wondering. Okay, tough crowd. Oh, yeah. You work with me, I know that you know that. Well, yeah, so I've always done backend work, so that's just a warning. There's a reason why I'm done always backend, because I cannot do visually appealing stuff, so do not expect that much from my slides, sorry. So yeah, I just wanted to a bit explain the whole life cycle of iOS test and Appium. It's commonly that people just use zips for using these like applications for simulators, because the Xcode creates an app folder. And for real devices, IPA, which is actually also a zip. And then there's the part where you, if you haven't set no reset, we reset the simulator or the real device as much as we can. And then it's followed by starting the simulator, if it's a simulator test. So then followed by that, we uninstall the apps, and especially if there's a previous session, install the apps, and we trigger a session for launching the WDA. And we just then poll the endpoints until WDA is active and the XC test actually starts correctly. So why do I explain that? Common problems we got were about, so rewinding back a couple of years ago, we got a lot of issues in terms of this was really complicated. This was the time that Xcode, I think 8 was or 9 was released with iOS 9. This was a whole mess. And when I started actually making the slides for this talk, I realized actually we gotten a lot better. So, and I checked the issues in the last 6 months, and I realized that this was now the main problems were coming from people who had like 5, 6 devices connected to a Mac Mini. They had unexplainable problems, and since it's an Apple product, it's really hard to explain any problems when they occur. You can create a bug report, but usually don't get a response. So I just wanted to list some stuff that if you have a local on-premise solution that you run and then you have these issues, just to be aware. So yeah, one common problem is actually internet speed. As you can all imagine, like the Apple artifacts are growing and growing. I think they now allow you to download up to 200 megabytes just with your internet connection, your mobile connection. In the past, that was 100, so there's an enormous size right now in terms of what you can put in the IPA, which is a bit outrageous. And if you have a test session where you actually just put these onto, I don't know, some S3 bucket or whatever, you start to have really big issues in terms of parallelization. And the second thing is actually the problem with the Apple products. Usually what people go to is a Mac Mini, which is the cheapest offering you can get. But these things are not the best things on the world. So you pay a lot of money, but at the end what you get is average CPU, okay RAM, and when you have like 5, 6 devices connected to a Mac Mini, you really hit the bottlenecks of simple operations that you would never experience in your MacBook, because a MacBook is usually better than a Mac Mini. Even though like I couldn't even reproduce them locally, because a simulator consumes 3 gigabytes of memory and I have a 32 gigabyte RAM, so I don't see any of those problems. So within the time, like when we also with this real device cloud, we realized that even like unzipping operation for like 200 megabytes IPAs or apps were taking like tremendous time in certain cases, whereas like it would take like 2-3 seconds to unzip this thing. If you had like 3-4 parallel sessions, this would go to 10-15 seconds. And when you check the logs of what's going on, you see, okay, like this makes no sense. But it is actually a really big bottleneck when you do these tests with iOS. The second thing is the simulator UI consumes a lot of resources. Like I said, it's the same situation. Locally, you don't really see that. When you're a local tester, you just launch an Appium test and think everything's okay. And the moment you put in the cloud or even a local setup with multiple devices, you start to really see that your whole test session slows down. And I mean, this talk is mainly about the launch performance, but if you have that many devices, especially in simulator case, you do see that your test slows down, just with simple queries taking way too long because the system really runs out of resources. The third thing is Xcode build is, I will say it's a horrible tool. It's not built for CI, but it's a CI tool. So in the case of Appium, even if you want to just like when we are testing it, we need to, so when we're testing on iOS, WDA is built by Appium. And if you have this like happening in parallel, you get really, really weird results. Like if you have one device, Xcode builds it in 10 seconds. So you're like, great, awesome. And then you roll that to 5 devices, and then you see 1 minute, 1.5 minutes randomly. I don't know if Xcode has any locks or whatever, like on the file system level, but it's a really weird outcome. And the last thing is actually WDA was developed by Facebook with Carthage as a dependency management, and Carthage uses Git, which is not the most resource efficient thing when you want to do fast operations. So these are all the bottlenecks. And the third thing is actually the potential problem is that you still get failures with Xcode in terms of launching WDA, and there's no explanation. Even if you look at the internal components, if you know a bit of reverse engineering, you see that it's actually just an Apple binary issue. And you can create a bug report and hope that Apple responds, but at least within my experience, that Apple never really responds. So they're not the most thing. If you want to save in terms of system resources, I just want to list some stuff that it's like quite clear. If you use unzip apps as a thing, or if you have just a pre-script before you run the test where you actually unzip the files into a directory, you'll at some point see like a really drastic performance in terms of like system resource allocation. It's followed by like if you use bundle IDs instead of this, which is also really performant. And this is actually something new. I think it came with Xcode 10. There's now a headless mode. You don't need the whole simulator UI, which actually gives you a lot of system resources back. There are other ways to get this, the test video. You can use the MJPEG support of Appium. This will allow you to actually record the video, and you don't really need the whole UIs of watching the whole test. There are nice things that came with Xcode as well. Like with Xcode 9, they got the built for testing stuff, so that WDA is not always compiled. This was a really big issue in the past. Every time you ran the Xcode test, this would just build it from scratch, and that was really unpredictable. But now we can use actually the already built resources, and this actually already like saves you a lot of either CPU or memory usage. And of course, the typical like the Appium capability, no reset, adds a lot of performance. There are also some new stuff called like the WebDriver agent URL, and this already also helps you with pre-started WDA sessions. And last thing, but not least, do not restart the Appium server. I will come to that in a bit. Since iOS 9, Appium actually really worked on like caching already heavy system dependent resources, so processes, so that they're not always restarted. If you, for example, launch WDA like a full Appium session on a really simple app, it takes like 10 seconds to start the whole thing when the simulator is already opened. But the next time you start this actually, it takes 6 seconds. There are certain stuff that we cannot really speed up due to them being full Apple binaries. But if you don't restart the Appium server all the time, then these are cached and reused, which already gives a big speed boost. I just wanted to like show a small test in terms of like especially for headless. Like I said, it's a really simple thing, and I can just shut it down. Nope, okay, we don't have the thing. I can even actually show the activity monitor in terms of resource allocation. Like you all can already see like how much it's used from the launch DSIM. Of course, at some point it will start going back normal because it just put the simulator. And next time you run the test, you will most likely not see that. And as you can see, there's nothing here, so it's a headless test. And if you don't use headless, you will get the beautiful simulator UI, all the core simulator stuff. It also slows down, but if you have any like CPU intensive, like UI intensive work in your applications, this really starts to come into effect. Like if you have like a video playing app or anything, you can save a lot of resources by just turning off the simulator UI. And yeah, actually one of the features I really like is this whole use pre-built WDA and derived data path, which will also come in the slides in a second. I just need to kill it. Like I said, we cache everything, which is really helpful in terms of the test execution, but not easy in terms of the demo. So currently, I just use the pre-built WDA resources, like artifacts. So I'm not going to ask Xcode, hey, build everything and do your own thing, but I will just say, please use this one. Sorry. Yeah. So it came into effect, and it already works. How is this useful? You sometimes have like issues in terms of building WDA. There might be some, I know, Xcode version issue that Xcode cannot build it. We also try to release Appium as often as we can with every Xcode version. But of course, when they have a breaking change, we cannot just roll it out like nothing happened. We first try to address it. But what you can do on the other side is basically using these artifacts, and which they can be also found on the, let me find that, in the WebDriver agent GitHub page in the releases part. So we release these artifacts with Xcode versions. So you can download that and then use them, which will probably make it safer in terms of Xcode updates. And then Appium doesn't work on that Xcode version because our response time also depends on how many breaking changes Apple does. So what can be done further? These are kind of like what Appium is trying to do in order to make it more seamless for users. And I know that it's like you shouldn't know this much stuff in terms of having a nice test execution, but Apple, like I said, is not the friendliest in terms of the stuff. So we leave certain stuff to the user, and because we realize that if we also make it like explicit and say, okay, this is the only way, then Apple makes an update to Xcode, and then that part doesn't work at all. So we try to have like alternatives and leave it to Apple as much as we can, and the stuff that speeds it up, we kind of like leave it optional. So yeah, we're trying to be smarter at caching. Like this was really painful to run the stuff like a year ago or a year and a half ago, and then the process caches were introduced in terms of keeping Xcode builds alive, so you don't need to start from scratch. We are working on removing a lot of non-Node.js dependencies. We start a lot of processes, and they also take a lot of time sometimes. We did a lot of removals for a real device. We don't depend on lib mobile device anymore, which is really nice. We try to make the setup a lot simpler so that people don't need to care about these changes all the time. And one last project, I actually want to demo this. It's a new project called IDB from Facebook. They're basically trying to build ADB for iOS, but it is really experimental. Like it's not stable yet. It worked a month ago when I talked to our amazing marketing team. Hey, I want to give a talk. And then with Xcode 11, it doesn't work anymore. So they're trying to work on that. But I hope that in a couple of months with more community usage, they will make it more reliable. And please, if you're ever interested in this stuff, join the open source community. We're trying to get more people on board. It's actually a small amount of people who actually develop Appium in all the drivers and all the platforms. So if you're interested, please find me, and we'd like to see more people on board. And questions, if there are any.
You mentioned that Xcode build takes so much time to build the binaries.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find any way to optimize it?
Yeah, like basically just using the artifacts that are already produced. There's not much to do over there, sadly. I mean, for simulators it's okay, but it's horrible for real devices, for example, because of the signing process of Apple. But you know, there's the antitrust case going on in the US, so maybe they open source that thing, and we don't need to care about that.
So I remember from 2 years back that like mobile testing and also with Appium was actually quite painful to like get it set up and get it going. So the last 2 years, so how much easier would you say did it get, like, or did it get like significantly?
I would say a lot. Like, I think simulator, like I usually always would work with real devices, and that was really painful. When I worked on the simulator, it was like, it really worked seamlessly, which made me happy. And for real devices, we removed all the painful dependencies of libl mobile device and stuff in the last release. So yeah, you just need Xcode right now for example, real devices. You don't need anything else. And Appium handles all the dependencies. But of course, we're trying to improve it even further. If you have any pain points, also like point out, you know, when you work on the project, you don't really see what is painful for the user sometimes. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.